The Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, presented by Sticks.com. I'm Katie Gauze. He's Michael Agello. And the Hurricanes are singing staying alive, because they are going to keep going just a little bit longer. They get their first win in the conference final under Rod Brind'Amour, 3-0 the final score. They defeat the Florida Panthers. So now this series shifts back to Raleigh, where Florida has a chance yet again to end things. It's 3-1 now. Well, let's talk about some of the biggest points from this game, right? There's a few areas that really stood out in terms of this victory for Carolina. First things first, Michael, they scored first, their first lead of the series. And you have to imagine, with a team like Carolina, who plays the style that they do, this is what they've been waiting for. It certainly looked that way. What did you make of the fact that Carolina got this lead and overall played what looked like a much more complete game from both sides of the puck?
Oh, sorry. No, and that's the type of game Carolina wants to play, is the yawner.
That's right.
That they, as you said, they got the opening goal from Stankov on a great play by Nikishkin, who forwarded the puck to him, and he fired a top corner wrister past Bobrovsky. But yeah, this team plays a lot different when they're in the lead than when they're trailing. I don't think they feel comfortable opening it up. And yeah, when they do that, they're not the most exciting team, but winning is exciting. And they won tonight, and they stayed alive.
All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about who was in for Florida and who was out in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about the guys who showed up in a big way for Carolina tonight. One of those being Jaccob Slavin. He was an absolute horse. But I think across the board, you saw, all of the top players sort of showing up and playing some of their best games, if not their best game, of this series here tonight. And it's a must-win game. It's a must-win desperation type situation. But that's when you need your best players to show up. Who on Carolina stood out to you? What did you notice from Slavin, or were there other players that you were just like, you know what, this was a moment that he needed to be here, and I noticed him?
Well, I mean, Slavin's one of the best defensemen in the league. I mean, he's not, a fantastic offensive defenseman, but in terms of defense, in terms of two-way.
They're trying to create a new award for him.
Yeah, right. There should be a Bobby Orr trophy and a Rod Langway trophy, or something of that nature, where it's an offensive defenseman, just like there's a defensive forward award, the Selke. There should be two awards. He would be the leading candidate for the defenseman award almost every year.
Sure.
But yeah, he was fantastic tonight. Played 28 minutes. I mean, what was it? He had 4 block shots. And a couple in really key instances. The one he blocked with his stick, another one he blocked with his, I think it was his skate. I mean, yeah, this was desperation mode, as you said. I mean, Burns played almost 25 minutes. Slavin played 28. They really went with 5 defensemen because Morrow played less than 9. So, it was a situation where they got the lead, and then they had to basically choke out the Florida Panthers in this game. And, the Panthers fell behind. Then it was a video review for offside that they got that, and they stayed down by 1 goal until they pulled the goalie. But yeah, full marks to Carolina, but it's going to be even tougher, going back to Carolina for Game 5 on Wednesday.
Well, especially considering that Florida has actually been, a far better team, if you can believe it, actually on the road. So the challenge, despite the fact that leading into this series, Carolina owned home ice and just dominated with that crowd advantage, hasn't been the case in this series. So we'll see if Florida can finish it off then. Again, we've talked about some of the things that Carolina did well tonight. Getting the lead was important. It allowed them to play their game. But would you agree with the fact that this wasn't the sharpest, best Panthers team that we've seen? It certainly looked like they were a little bit more human on their own end. And it wasn't just what Carolina was doing. There were maybe a little bit of self-inflicted wounds going on here tonight in terms of some of the sharpness. It just definitely didn't feel like you had the same pace and the same jump from this team.
It's not the same pace, and the decision making was questionable. There were a few instances where, I think it was Carter Verhaeghe had an opportunity to shoot, and he held onto the puck too long and allowed the Carolina defense to close in and not allow him to get a good shot. I mean, that was sort of part and parcel with what was going on in this game. It's like it was holding onto the puck in a half a second too long or making the wrong pass. It just didn't seem to be that they were in sync. And that, I mean, that's a little surprising but as I said before we started recording, now this is 0-2 at home in elimination games. They had Toronto after beating them in game 5 soundly. They lost to Toronto in game 6 and had to go back to Toronto for game 7. Now, of course, they won, but I think, all things being equal, they would have preferred to not have to get back on a plane and go to Raleigh to play on Wednesday, but now they have to.
All right. Well, and another topic with Florida, we'll keep kind of discussing the Panthers before we switch gears back to Carolina. The players who weren't in tonight, right? Because we know that they were missing Reinhart, Mikkola, and Greer. They were all out. So Nico Sturm and Balinskis come in. But those 3 guys are all big pieces, all for different reasons. And, it starts to beg the question, was this the right decision? Because, again, I know they're injured, but this is a day-to-day. You saw the video of Reinhart kind of jumping around in the locker room before the game. Again, you don't know what guys are dealing with, but this is a situation where it feels like if this was a game 7, those guys would all be in there. Right. And it's a choice to not put them in for a game like this, because now you do run the risk of having to head back on the road. You always want to, you want to close out on a team as quickly as you can. You never know what can happen. So what was kind of your impression of the decisions by Florida to have those 3 pieces not be in the game? And I guess maybe what did they truly miss the most from each of those guys?
Well, the one I think they missed the most was Mikkola, because Mikkola has had such a great playoff, and this is not a defenseman who was known for his offensive chops. And I keep joking that he's like playing like Bobby Orr. He's just been really active offensively, and I think that's the whole mode that the Panthers have been in the last few weeks. Seth Jones having that big game in game 7 against Toronto. Mikkola has contributed a lot. Reinhart, they definitely miss him. And I think what has happened here is they're being too cute. They were like, okay, let's hold these guys out. Let's see if we can win with Balinskis and Jesper Boquist replacing Reinhart, who, he scored the game winner in game 3. Let's see if we can get through this game without those guys and then give them a full week to week and a half off so they're fully healthy. But now you're going back for game 5, and I think you probably have to put 1 or maybe 2 of them in. Maybe you hold Reinhart out because he's so important going forward. But I think that these are 3 players that have helped them in the past and need to help them to get to the Stanley Cup Final again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, and again, reminder everyone that the Playoff Frenzy Live is presented by Sticks.com. Don't break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro level composite stick without the pro level price tag at Sticks.com. That's STIX.com. And always, fans, we want you to chime in, share your comments, let us know what you're thinking, any questions you have, any breakdowns that you noticed that maybe we missed out on, but let us know what you're thinking on these matchups, because I just saw a comment right before I did the ad read there, and I liked it. Did the Panthers just ghost the offense tonight, or was this the soft launch of a Carolina comeback? And again, certainly we saw things from Carolina tonight that are encouraging in what they want to do, but it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to think that this Panthers team, with what that they're made of, is going to allow something like that to occur. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't buy it. Partially because this is the first conference final game that Carolina has won since 2006. So there isn't exactly some great comeback. I don't read a great comeback from this group. The other thing is, I mean, Florida, we've seen it in the Stanley Cup Final last year where they were up 3-0 and then allowed Edmonton to get back into the series 3-3 before they finished it off. As I mentioned before, they were up 3-2 after a 6-1 win against Toronto and then allowed Toronto to even it up to go back to Game 7. So, maybe there's a little bit of a lack of finish. Maybe there's a little bit of complacency here. But in the end, they're going to bury them. I mean, it's just a matter of how long. So we'll see.
It does feel that way. All right, another great comment here, and this is one of my favorite players to watch. I love his style. I love what he brings, and I'm excited to see what he does in Carolina for a long time. But Logan Stankov, and was he just crowned the rookie king of Raleigh or what? Because certainly, in all the drama that occurred during the Mikko Rantanen debacle and obviously him going to Dallas, getting Stankoven is certainly one bright spot. Again, it's going to be something that not is only impactful now, but I think is going to make an impact on this team for quite a while. He's going to be a good player there. But what have you really liked about what Stankoven has brought since coming to the Hurricanes?
He's just a high motor player with a lot of skill. I mean, he's not the biggest player in the world, but I think he provides energy and he provides skill. I mean, that shot that he had, that picked the top corner was fantastic. He's not Mikko Rantanen. We know that Carolina was looking for a big power forward to sort of complement Svechnikov.
Sure. Yeah.
And, they lost Gensel in free agency after they traded for him last year. Then they try to trade for Rantanen and get him, but then he doesn't want to stay there. And they bring in Stankoven, and they can hold on to Stankoven for a while. But as good as he is, I think that sort of impact forward, that bull in a china shop that Mikko Rantanen is sort of what they're missing. I mean, they have Svechnikov, but I mean, they don't have much else in terms of impact big forwards. Kotkaniemi doesn't do it. I mean, Aho is a great center, but he's not a big player. These teams that win, like Florida, like Edmonton, they have the skill and they have the size and they have the sandpaper. And I think one of the failings of the Carolina Hurricanes is they have some of that, but they don't have all of it.
Yeah, and I think had this game gone differently tonight, and had we been talking about Carolina being swept yet again in the conference final, there would be a lot of discussion about, is Rod Brind'Amour truly getting the most? Like, is this just all that he can get from this team? Because it does feel like he's getting basically exactly what this group is capable of. He's squeezing all of the juice out of this group, that there just isn't quite enough left to cross that finish line, to make it to that final, to win a Stanley Cup, because like you mentioned, they don't have that generational game breaker type of a player. It's funny now, I mean, looking at this, you'd be saying, I wonder what a guy like Marty Necas would have looked like if he was still a part of this group. And, is there just something in Carolina that is preventing them from being able to bring in that player or have that final piece to this puzzle? Because it does feel like year after year, they try to go out and get someone and get something, and they're still left with this group that's good, but just doesn't feel like they have too much more to give. It's like there's not much more you can ask from Brind'Amour. He's getting a lot out of what he has to work with.
I mean, there are some critics who say that the reason that they have failed in the conference finals is because teams know the style that Brind'Amour plays and they can best it. I mean, it's easier said than done. There are a lot of teams that can't, but Florida has been able to do it, and Boston did it a few years ago in the conference final. So, that is a factor. I also think that this is a failure of imagination of the Carolina Hurricanes organization. I've been critical of Tom Dundon because I think at certain points he doesn't flex his financial muscle to get players, and when he does, there are players like Rantanen who don't want to be in Raleigh. I think there's a failure of imagination of Eric Tulsky. He's a very analytic-based general manager, and sometimes analytics are not the answer for everything. And also, I mean, how many years have we talked about the fact that this team does not have the goaltending to win in the playoffs? Now, Freddie Anderson, full marks, but they played a shutdown, strap down defensive game, and he made 20 saves for the shutout. Their goaltending has never been goaltending that could make 35 saves to steal a game. And that's a failure of this organization. They didn't go out and get John Gibson. They didn't go out and get one of a number of goalies over the last few years. And who knows how many series they would have won had they done that.
Yeah, no question. Let's switch gears to talk a little bit more about Florida, because there aren't a lot of flaws or a lot of things that this team has not done well. But one thing that they have not done well in the last 2 games in particular is score on the power play. And I'm not sure if that's more a testament to the PK for Carolina, which is exceptionally good. I think it was up to 22 for 23 on the road throughout this postseason, which is excellent. But can Florida win this series and finish this off, even if they don't score on the power play again? Which I do think that they will. But maybe to take it back to the initial question, is this more a Florida power play problem, or is this a really good PK for Carolina? What's kind of your assessment?
I think it's a little of both. I think Carolina made adjustments after giving up 4 power play goals in the first 2 games, but the loss of Reinhart, who scored 13 power play goals during the regular season, definitely has to hurt. Now, he hasn't scored much on the power play during the playoffs, but he's a threat. And that there's, this is a guy who was second to Austin Matthews last season in the Rocket Richard, and he scored, I think it was 39 goals this year. So he's definitely a threat, and not having him in the lineup. And I mean, on their first power play tonight, they played both Seth Jones and Aaron Ekblad. Not many teams play 2 defensemen on their number 1 power play anymore, and they were forced to because Reinhart was not available.
Some teams don't play any defensemen anymore. It's what was it, Toronto? Did they have the 5 forward group at one point?
Yeah, that won't happen anymore because.
Well, yeah, we won't see that again. Before we switch gears and talk a little bit about the game tomorrow night we have between Dallas and Edmonton in that Western Conference Final. There were a few calls from tonight's game that I just found interesting, and I want to get your take. The first was we saw yet another very interesting embellishment penalty being called. And those are just, we see embellishments, but this playoffs have taken them to another level. So I want to ask first what your thoughts were on that, and then I've got one more for you.
Yeah, I mean, I never put anything past Matthew Tkachuk, but this is what I don't understand. It's either a penalty for, a minor for on Tkachuk, or it's embellishment. It can't be both. A friend who played basketball in his youth, in a basketball game, the referee called a block and a charge. It can only be one. It can't be both.
Right.
So and they
cancel each other out.
Yeah, they constantly do that. Now later in the game, when was it Nate Schmidt he responded against Blake. That was a saw off there, because first Blake slashed him and then Schmidt went back at him and he evened it up. Okay, that's understandable. That's 2 separate infractions. But here it's either he's embellishing the call or he's actually being hooked or held or whatever. You got to make a decision, and calling both of them at the same time is just plain weak.
Yeah, it was even more interesting because the ref that was right there staring at it doesn't make the hooking call. The far ref does. Then the close ref made the embellishment. So, what are we doing? It's definitely interesting. But again, we know the refs have a tough job, but when these 2 things cannot coexist, it starts to get a little bit more confusing. All right, the other one I wanted to ask you about quickly was, I saw a lot of people online pretty upset about this, is the lack of a penalty shot being called on Anton Lundell's breakaway. I've seen a lot of textbook that should be a penalty shot call. That one felt like it fit pretty well.
Yeah, I was a little surprised myself. It looked as if the penalty had affected his ability on a breakaway, on a clear break, to make the move that he normally would make. And that's textbook penalty shot, but they only called the minor penalty. So I don't know, it shouldn't matter what the score is at the time, but I almost get the feeling, well, I don't want to cost Carolina their season. So let's not call the penalty shot. Let's just play it safe and call the minor. That's not the way it works.
No. I mean, at the end of the day, the penalty shots are it was, I think it checked every box. And so you can't have refs who are, worried about impacting the results of a game when they're missing what is supposed to be a textbook call that checks the boxes that are qualifying it. But again, I don't think it would have changed anything. Maybe it would have. We'll see. Who knows? Either way, Carolina is moving on to go home to fight to another day. Let's talk a little bit about Dallas and Edmonton, because that series has been pretty interesting. We've seen a little back and forth. We have seen the resurgence of Jeff Skinner, and that has been certainly, Stuart Skinner. Jeff Skinner not playing, but we like him, our Buffalo friend, now in the playoffs. So Stuart Skinner, coming in, after losing the net, comes back, obviously helps them in the last series. He's been excellent again. There's some other storylines that are interesting in this one. We're waiting to see what happens with Ekholm, because Chris Knobloch's saying he's still undecided, listing him as day-to-day. But if he can come in and be available for Game 4, we'll start there. What kind of a difference does that make for an Edmonton team that already seems to be kind of in the control seat for this game?
I mean, it will make a big difference, but I almost get the feel that this is similar to Florida with Reinhart and Mikola.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, you're up 2-1. You don't want to bring this guy back after being out for months and rush him back and then him getting re-hurt. It's like, okay, if you're 2-2 and you're going Game 5 back to Dallas, then maybe you're in better shape. So I think they'll be very conservative and very cautious. The one thing is, they could do what Dallas did late in the series against Winnipeg and play 7 defensemen just in case they want to sort of slowly bring Ekholm in. But when you have Ekholm there, you want to play him on the penalty kill. You want to play him in defensive situations. You don't want to sort of spoon feed minutes to him. Yeah. But you have to make sure that he's capable and physically capable of being able to do that. So it'll be an interesting decision to see what Chris Knobloch and the Oilers decide before tomorrow night's game.
Well, the Dallas Stars are kind of in a position where they hope that they have the opportunity to make a decision, and that decision would be that Roope Hintz can be back in the lineup, can be healthy. So he tried it for Game 3 there, took the warm-up, didn't even really make it through the whole warm-up, was unable to go. He's saying now that he hopes to play in Game 4 tomorrow. I guess, what kind of it's so tough because that these are hockey players, right? And they'll do absolutely anything to be in a game. And it feels like for Dallas, this is definitely a different scenario, right? They are in a little bit more of a desperation mode, needing to kind of tie this series back up. What is your kind of assessment on, the status of Roope Hintz and how that affects the Stars' ability to get back in the series?
Well, first, this wasn't worth a suspension. This wasn't worth a fine. My God, I mean, it was a baseball swing that hit him on the ankle, and he couldn't. It wasn't like they were trying to draw a suspension out of Darnell Nurse. He didn't play in a key game because of this injury. So the miscalculation on the part of the Department of Player Safety, again, is another in a long list of stupidity on their part. It
should have been a major in the game because by the rule of the law, it says if it results in injury, it's a 5. And they missed that. And then they missed the opportunity to do it. I mean, a lot of head scratchers on that, but continue.
Yeah, now I think it affected Dallas in Game 3 because Hintz is probably their best two-way center. When you have him matched up against either McDavid or Draisaitl, not that he's going to neutralize those guys because they're both fantastic, but he can limit their offensive chances because of how good he is. Now, even if he's healthy in Game 4, who knows at what percentage he's going to be. Who knows if he can move with those guys? McDavid is the best skater or one of the best skaters in the league, and Draisaitl is just so powerful. If Hintz cannot match up against them, then he may be more of a liability in the lineup than he is a help. And we know that it affected them. That McDavid goal at 2-1 late in the second period was a dagger. They had 22 shots on goal in the second period and worked very hard to get the Bischel goal to make it 2-1 just before the end of the second period. And then McDavid puts them back up 2 goals, and basically all the air was out of the balloon at that point for the Stars.
Yeah, I mean, and the other value that Hintz brings is, right, like he was able to spark something with Mikko Rantanen. And let's be honest, a big reason Dallas is in this position and is in this conference final, right, is because of the strong gameplay we've seen from Mikko, who's stolen games for them like he did in the Colorado series. He had a big impact in the series against Winnipeg. So again, this is something that has a trickle-down effect. You're not just missing a guy just because of what he brings. It's how he affects the rest of the entire lineup for the Stars, who, for a second it looked like their depth had maybe gotten going. They'd sparked something there, and maybe him not being a part of it just sort of threw everything off. But whether he's in or out, Dallas is definitely going to have to find another gear if they want to compete against Edmonton, because it seems like they're rolling. Here's one for you, because, again, we've talked about the series with Carolina, and barring anything kind of incredible, nothing against the Hurricanes, Florida is going to be moving on. They are going to be going to the Stanley Cup Final yet again. Who are you more interested in seeing them face in terms of a good matchup, giving us the best Stanley Cup Final possible, having it be really challenging, having it be really exciting? Does it feel like at this point the Oilers are the more interesting matchup to try and knock off the defending champs?
I mean, it'll be like a sequel. I mean, I don't really foresee it going any different. Although, Florida sort of taking the foot off the gas pedal last year made it exciting to come, for Edmonton to come back from 3-0 to go 3-3 and then win and then lose in Game 7. I actually think Florida-Dallas would be a much more interesting series, because I think we know what is going to happen in Florida-Edmonton. I've been saying for a couple rounds here that, the secret to beating Edmonton is beating down McDavid and Draisaitl. Not, you're not going to fight them, obviously, but you're going to physically pound them. And Vegas couldn't do it because they couldn't catch up to them. And right now, Dallas doesn't seem to, they seem to be playing very passively against them. That's not going to be a problem with Florida. They will run them through the board. Marchand and Bennett will take their heads off. And I mean, that's sort of what you have to do with Edmonton. And right now in this series with Dallas, I mean, the loss of Connor Brown, who I think has 5 goals in the postseason. I mean, Edmonton has been winning the top 6 battle and the bottom 6 battle. And when that happens, you lose. But with Brown out as a bottom 6 guy who's been producing for them, if that provides a little bit of a spark to Dallas and they get better play out of their bottom 6, then Game 4 could be very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if we end up seeing what it feels like will be the final between the Oilers and the Panthers, those are the 2 teams who consistently at this point through the playoffs have had the most depth, who have checked the most boxes in terms of complete team games. So stands to say that would probably be the most interesting series, but we'll see. Let's talk a little bit about Game 5 before we put a pin on it and we see what happens once they head to Raleighwood, as they call it in Carolina. If you're looking for a win for Carolina, who needs to step up? If you're looking for a win for Florida, who needs to be the biggest factor for each team?
With Carolina, I think it rests squarely on the shoulders of Freddie Anderson again. I mean, the team in front of them is going to have to play defensively as they did tonight, but Anderson's going to need to make the big save at the right time. If he does that, then they have a chance to send it back to Florida for a Game 6. If he's just average, like he was in the first 2 games, it's good night, nurse. It's over with. In terms of Florida, I mean, you look at the box score tonight: Barkov -3, Tkachuk -2, Seth Jones -3, Brad Marchand -2. You need better.
Very uncharacteristic.
Yeah, you need better. And we know there was 2 empty net goals, but you need better performances out of your top players, and they seem to not have it tonight.
I mean, I think the one factor for Florida that has been incredibly consistent, other than the fact that really every night it is someone else stepping up. So it's like the lack of consistency of who's scoring every night is still a strength because someone else is always stepping up. But one person who has been consistently strong throughout, and honestly, despite tonight's game was excellent too, was Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, what a goalie duel it's been. And I mean, in a night like this, I think normally you'd say, oh man, you wasted such a great performance from your goaltender. But they're not really wasted because Bob's been doing it almost every night at this point. So you kind of got to a point where you're starting to expect it. Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. What's that, Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to say, he has been on. He has been
it's crazy.
Since game 3 of Toronto. I mean, he really didn't play well against Tampa, and he played not very good against Toronto in the first 2 games in Toronto. Second period of game 3, he became the Bobrovsky that, won a Stanley Cup and won a Conn Smythe.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the minuses on some of the best players on Florida tonight, like Barkov and Tkachuk. There's one thing I know for sure. If they have a night like that, don't expect them to have another one anytime soon. And all they need is one more win. So that doesn't bode well for the Carolina Hurricanes. They're going to be re-energized, sharper, and stronger. And I have a strong feeling that they are going to find a way to close things out because they love playing on the road, it seems like, this year. All right, Michael, great stuff. Obviously, lots of good hockey left as we look forward to Game 5 in this series between Carolina and Florida. But first, we've got Game 4 between Dallas and Edmonton. Lots of fireworks out west as well. That does it for the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us, for commenting, for tuning in, and letting us know what your thoughts on all the action happening across the Stanley Cup playoffs as you're thinking about. But that does it for this episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all after.